Power at 2/3. Data core reinitialized. Ocular system online. Adjusting focus. Are you alright, pilot?
Yeah. Who are you?
I am BT-7274, a Vanguard-class Titan of the Militia SRS, Marauder Corps. You may call me BT.
BT. Got it.
BT-7274 is one half of the buddy adventure that is the single-player storyline of Titanfall 2. BT is concerned with peak optimal effectiveness, because at its core is a soldier. It's a soldier's mind. This is part of the programming that it's been gifted with by its designers. It's also been programmed with the directive to protect the human being under its care, the person that it's linked with and shares a bond with. In order to do this in as effective a way possible, the programmers that designed BT's systems programmed it with a maternal instinct. BT is a huge, broad-shouldered, strong, deeply voiced character, one that definitely codes as male. But the thrust of this essay is looking to prove that beneath that deep-voiced, soldierly exterior beats the mechanical heart of a mother figure, protecting a child figure.
Pilot, this Titan weapon is an advanced design and may give us a tactical advantage.
I think somebody's in love.
A human's concept of love requires admiration, attraction, devotion, and respect. Conclusion. I am 50% in love.
BT is an expression of alternative masculinity that is somewhat surprising, especially since that sort of thing doesn't happen too often in the military shooter sphere. It doesn't concern itself with body count or machismo or dominance. And the games industry could not do better than to look at BT's characterization as a benchmark for the medium. For the uninitiated, Titanfall 2 is Respawn Entertainment's follow-up to their 2014 multiplayer shooter Titanfall. The first game didn't have a story, so to speak, but instead had a mode that allowed players to cycle through either the Interstellar Manufacturing Corporation or the Frontier Militia. This mode was still fully multiplayer. The story mode in Titanfall, the original Titanfall, was fully multiplayer, but there were these little narrative end caps before and after the mission that told something of a story. Both groups are so far away from Earth as to be a far-flung colony, and really the whole universe is set up to have a living on the fringe of civilization vibe. It's really super colonial. The conflict in this game and the one preceding it could be boiled down to what if the Republic of California didn't want to join the Union, and the Union sent a corporation to pacify them? Although any kind of government oversight is conspicuously absent, almost as if this story wasn't meant to be any kind of commentary on anything imperial that maybe the United States or other world powers were doing at the time. I don't think that this game was meant to be openly political, but most stories weren't. Most stories aren't openly political. At least most commercial stories. Really, the story of Titanfall and Titanfall 2, the plot, isn't the focus of this essay. So moving on, all you really need to know is about the background of the world, and that there are soldiers with enhanced abilities that are called pilots, that's capital P, and there are things that they pilot called Titans, capital T. Titans themselves are a mixture of artillery, force multiplier, and controllable climate-controlled suit of armor. It's definitely more Macross and less Gundam, although it wouldn't be inaccurate to identify Titanfall's universe as a kind of Call of Duty crossed with mecha genre. The big thing for this essay is how each Titan is actually a form of artificial intelligence, and that the Vanguard type of Titan, piloted by Rifleman Jack Cooper, is a character in its own right. It is...
BT!
Got you.
It is sentient armor, sentient tank, and mission control, kind of, all wrapped up in a sweet maternal package. Yes, I keep saying maternal, I mean it. Armor as a concept isn't just a type of artistic expression, it really never has been. Even ceremonial armor has roots in real-world application. It's definitely all about function over form, and in every era has been created for an explicit purpose, protecting those that wear the armor, or in the case of mechanized infantry, pilot the armor, or drive the armor. If this is true, then sentient armor would also be created for a purpose. But this is a tricky situation. Never before have thinking beings, real thinking beings, never have they been able so easily to ask their creators, not gods, but real life mortal designers, just what their purpose is. Armor that will be created with the capacity for independent action and thought would likely have a set of rules that govern that behavior, rules imposed by their designer in a almost 10 Commandments sort of way. Fans of artificial intelligence and science fiction stories going back decades, or really any just well-read sci-fi folks, are likely shouting at their screens right now, Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, good God, man! So, they are as follows. Number 1. A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Number 2. A robot must obey orders given by a human being, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. Number 3. A robot must protect its own existence as long as it doesn't conflict with the first and second laws. Of course, Asimov's 3 laws seek to safeguard humanity against the potential rebellion of their creations. While the idea of creating an entire subset of thinking beings as intrinsically subservient is really a topic for another day, what I'm interested in talking about here are the reasons that the designers of our fictitious suit of armor, sentient armor, would forego those usual laws in favor of other criteria. The 3 laws really wouldn't allow for a machine intelligence that were designed with them in mind to engage in warfare. Quick aside here, just in case you haven't read any of Asimov's stuff, you really ought to. Asimov's corpus of work, his extended body of work, is wonderful, especially if you're interested in science fiction and ideas about robotics and ideas about what it means to be a human. I mean, just go on TV Tropes and search for Isaac Asimov, and you're going to find a bunch of just like a list of all kinds of stories that he's written that are about the philosophical underpinnings of the way the 3 laws would work and how they may not work. So check that out. So, why would any fighting force want to have mechanized infantry that is sentient, that is thinking? And this is a question that isn't often brought up in the wars game genre, especially those that have AI, which is something that you see more and more. Advanced Warfare, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare did it. Titanfall 2 does it. Even Halo does it. If you're not careful, those AIs can go full Terminator. On the one hand, having a sentient suit of giant armor would allow that being to make its own decisions in combat, taking the pressure off of their flesh and blood comrades that would allow them to make other potentially more important decisions. This would allow those pilots and infantry a greater degree of operational freedom. On the other hand, you definitely run the risk of rebellion from those that you've created, those that you've slotted into warfare servitude. The ethics of creating a fully functional, self-aware intelligence and then programming an inviolate sense of duty into it is something that really ought to be its own essay. Anyway, I think one way to go about it, to allow for the first possibility while preventing the second, is to program upon the sentient armor a sense of duty, not just to the mission or just to the overall cause, but to an individual unit or even a single soldier.
This way, Cooper.
What are you doing?
Protocol 3.
Get the Ark out of here!
Negative. We are trapped. I will not lose another pilot. Brace for impact.
It would make much more sense to program a walking weapons platform with a kind of almost biological duty than to try to have hard locks on this programming a la RoboCop. I mean, look at how well that turned out for the people that created RoboCop. In many ways, Titanfall 2's story is pretty typical. Let's do a little experiment. Try to answer this question and really just shout it as loud as you can for your neighbors to hear. The story is about a plucky resistance struggling against a monolithic enemy who is on the verge of deploying a superweapon with the aim of wiping out the resistance, usually by destroying a planet, the planet that they're based upon. Yeah, it's Star Wars. Of course it's Star Wars. Titanfall 2's conflict is essentially the conflict of Star Wars, which isn't to say that there are space wizards in this story, but it's pretty old. The conflict itself is not necessarily new. Rebellion against authority is an American tradition, and Titanfall 2's conflict is really kind of an American-style conflict. Remember what I said about how things aren't necessarily explicitly political? For me, the most interesting part of Titanfall 2 is not the mission, which is to stop a space-time weapon from destroying the home planet of the frontier militia called Harmony, which, now that I'm saying that out loud, is pretty on the nose. The most interesting part for me right now is how Jack and BT interact and work together to complete that mission. In summary, Titanfall 2's story is really about a grunt that's not special. Sure, he's been trained by Captain Lastimosa to be a pilot, but he's not a pilot yet. He is given power and potential, and with the help of his mother figure / protector, he's able to fully realize that potential.
BT, transfer authorization to new pilot. Link, Bravo Tango 7274. Cooper, take my Titan. Use my helmet and my jump kit. This is the real thing. Take care of him.
Here are the 3 Asimov-style directives that govern BT-7472's actions and its personality. Note that these are Asimov-styled, but they are not the 3 laws of robotics.
Protocol 1. Link to pilot. Establishing neural link. Neural link established. Rifleman Jack Cooper, you are now confirmed as acting pilot of BT-7274. Protocol 2. Uphold the mission. Protocol 3. Protect the pilot.
Linking with the pilot in this case directly references a neural link between Jack Cooper's brain and BT's programming and machine mind itself. Metaphorically, this could be really just an umbilical cord, but I think that might be a little bit too close, even for me. This link is a part of a measurement of the duo's effectiveness, something that BT references literally as their quote-unquote combat effectiveness rating. This steadily increases as Jack and BT thread the way through the extremely hostile world of Typhon and the story itself. I'd say this is a representation of the bond between a larger, more protective and knowledgeable being and the smaller being that it's designated to protect and nurture. Yes, nurture, because often BT's dialogue is set to reinforce that Jack is progressing along as a pilot in ways that BT finds satisfactory and good.
Are you sure I'll be safe over there?
No, but a true militia pilot takes risks for the welfare of others, as did Major Anderson and Captain Lastimosa before you.
Of course, the bond here could be something that's not maternal, that's other than maternal. It could be the bond of 2 soldiers that work together really well and have been through a lot together and are willing to work as a team to perform the mission that they've been assigned. It could be the bond of 2 friends who genuinely enjoy each other's skills and company and would hope to continue that relationship into their later years. It could even be that of 2 lovers who find meaning and enjoyment through their sense of common duty and common bond. Those are all valid interpretations, but I think that the maternal bond that I'm seeing from BT towards Jack is due to the framing that the story places around the entire situation. Most of the dialogue between Jack and BT is that of guidance, encouragement, and protectiveness, and it's almost all one way. Every now and then Jack will express concern for BT, but most of the time he's still adjusting to his new abilities. The few times that BT calls out for help, it seems to be out of an abundant sense of caution rather than any real fear of destruction. Trust is a large aspect in the relationship between a mother and child, between protector and protected, and the amount of trust that Jack has in BT's judgment doesn't start off at a low level. From the very beginning, Jack follows BT's lead, even when he's ostensibly piloting the Titans every step. It is BT that decides which route to take in order to fulfill their mission. It is BT who decides when and where to ask Jack to perform pilot acrobatics in service of their mission, and it is BT that expresses concern and gives advice to Jack during the pursuit of Jack's duties. BT asks Jack to trust him multiple times, and ultimately, not even ultimately, from the beginning, Jack does, with no hesitation. Other characters also treat BT as the primary decision maker in their relationship. Captain Cole, about halfway through the story, speaks almost only to BT in describing his and his men's situation. Military Commander Sarah Briggs, she is a pretty high-up member of the Frontier Militia, initially expresses surprise that BT was bonded to a simple rifleman, and tells BT that he's going to be reassigned to a quote-unquote fully qualified pilot. It is here that BT's reaction and instinctive protection of its charge is most strongly maternal. Briggs was talking about getting another pilot, and that's directly in violation of Protocol 3, Protect the Pilot. Briggs just told BT that the pilot he's been volunteering to and has a high effectiveness rating with isn't actually good enough to be a pilot and will therefore lose that status. This, in a roundabout way, is violating Protocol 3. In response, BT brings Jack inside of himself as a non-violent yet inherently protective declaration that he plans to protect this pilot even from his own superiors. It must be noted that nowhere in his 3 directives does it state that he must inherently, instinctively obey the orders of his superior or even a human being. This is one of the major differences between the AI units in Titanfall versus the positronic minds that feature throughout Isaac Asimov's fiction. BT disagrees with his superior, with Sarah Briggs, and requests permission to stay bonded with Jack Cooper. Our combat effectiveness rating is above 90%, BT tells her, which is really just another way of saying, we've been through a lot together, and I'm really the only one that can protect him correctly. I can imagine my own mother saying something like that, especially if she were a 2-story tall robot with the ability to shoot rockets off of her back, which she doesn't have, as far as I can tell. A machine soldier who has maternal instincts would instinctually shepherd the new blood under its charge. There are numerous parts of the story where this is emphasized. First, BT never suggests that it and Jack split up unless it can be helped, and only so when the circumstances make it impossible for Jack to ride inside BT, or when the mission requires someone with a smaller frame and more dexterous manipulators. BT ain't got small fingers, can't fit inside doors. BT suggests often that Jack should embark inside of its protective casing, partly because BT and Jack are more effective together, and this is really kind of a conceit of the gameplay. You are much more effective as piloting the Titan, but also because BT has a sincere desire to keep Jack from the danger of unprotected combat. Weirdly enough, BT is also a permissive mom, because often the game will start with a section where BT is performing some feat and Jack is riding on BT's shoulder. This looks a whole hell of a lot like a child riding on their parents' shoulders, and reinforces the power dynamics throughout the game. BT allowing Jack to ride this way is a development of BT's maternal instincts, because as Jack shows more and more proficiency as being a pilot, BT becomes more and more permissive. BT actually will compliment Jack on his skills in the industrial level and in the satellite dish level. Similarly, Jack stops questioning if things that BT proposes for the mission is safe or not, trusting that BT has his safety in mind even when attempting dangerous feats while in pursuit of their mission. BT also protects Jack's feelings and gives him realistic expectations for danger. Anytime Jack expresses doubt in himself, BT literally reassures him. BT gives Jack as much information about the potential dangerousness of his surroundings and actions. Often this is played for laughs because BT's a robot and robots are notoriously literal. But in general, BT knows that they have a mission to accomplish, and it's clear that BT values communication of information, especially since he believes Jack is a capable pilot, something that increases as the story progresses. There are other similarities between mother and child and BT and Jack in the game. BT is able to physically cradle Jack inside of himself, inside of its own body, which is, a pretty potent symbol that BT has a womb of sorts. It's very protective and it's nurturing. It's actually, when you see it whenever you go in, it's padded. It's very comfortable. BT is personally protective of Jack and relies on their bond, requesting that they stay bonded as mentioned earlier during the interaction with Sarah Briggs. And of course, BT-7472 sacrifices itself for Jack in the story's climax, completely unnecessarily, while intoning its maternal mantra, Protocol 3, Protect the Pilot. BT's characterization is not one of a member of a band of brothers watching each other's backs, but that of a huge, powerful, largely invulnerable mother who is interested in both protecting their charge and nurturing their abilities and development. This is extremely rare. In war games and war stories in general, The vulnerabilities that the player on the couch feels whenever they are outside of BT's protective casing is intentional, because you control a fragile and, yeah, extremely agile, but still super fragile human being. Especially on harder difficulties, the sense of vulnerability is extreme, and anytime the player can be inside of BT's welcoming, comfortable, climate-controlled womb, you are encouraged to do so not just by BT himself, but by the nature of the game world. So what does this mean? Well, it means a lot of different things depending on one's interpretation. One meaning could be that sentient beings that are superior in almost every way to your average or even above average, in the case of Titanfall 2's pilots, human beings would need to be forced into protecting those human beings. They would need to be forced into it. It begs the question, really, if you have the ability to create effective autonomous soldiers who think and act and learn in increasingly human ways, why would you even risk human lives to begin with? Unless you actually valued the AI minds. Anyway, this is really something that the military in 2017 are grappling with themselves. Do you give self-directing programming to Predator drones? Many people would balk at the outsourcing of combat to a machine. I mean, there's a movie that they call this the push-button age. I think it's This Island Earth. That sort of thing really isn't touched upon in Titanfall 2. Although there are AI adversaries on either side of the sentient spectrum, so-called simulacra like Ash, who BT fights throughout the game, seem to be just as human as Jack and BT, while the small and large and extra large drones that Jack encounters throughout the game, some of which are hackable to your side, seem to have no willpower or sentience of their own. At the very least, BT seems to have the grudging respect of the Frontier Militia, and the universe of the game outside of what's directly in the text itself confirms this, saying that Vanguard-class Titans like BT are soldiers in their own right. Another facet is a commentary about power and power differentials. In most war stories, and I'd wager in a real war itself, those with the most experience, the most knowledge, and the ability to think under pressure are the ones that less experienced folks take their lead, at least ideally. So what happens when you put that kind of mind, what is essentially a grizzled sergeant honed under fire, and you put that mind inside of a body that can withstand bullets, that can withstand rocket fire, that have shields? What happens to a person's identification of a soldier when not all soldiers are made of flesh and blood but still have thoughts? What happens when a non-human intelligence is respected enough to become the de facto leader of a group of soldiers? Titanfall 2's BT is in many ways characterized as just as human and just as valuable as the pilots that it is charged with protecting. The most important interpretation, at least for me, is in how BT can be identified as a person with strong maternal instincts that is coded as male. Outside of the story or world building or philosophical interpretations of personhood, Titanfall 2's BT is a vanguard, so to speak, for an alternative masculinity. It is coded as masculine. Its voice is deep, and on first blush, it totally registers as male, but its attitude and actions often come across as maternally protective, not paternally. Not in a fatherly way like many soldiers who are protective, but maternally, specific to this one person that they are protecting. BT has a womb. For your average player on the couch, the story showcases a burgeoning friendship between a knowledgeable, nigh-invulnerable juggernaut and a relatively fragile partner. Were BT to have a female-coded voice, the doubt that BT's nature is maternal would vanish instantly. That says something about masculinity, or at least the current state of masculinity. There's this cognitive dissonance, at least in my mind, as it works through the conflicting information that the game is putting out there. Male soldier, military setting, maternal mentorship, protectiveness. Titanfall 2's single-player story is great because it showcases this alternative masculinity. If you even see BT as masculine at all, some people might not. This is something that is desperately needed in war fiction and in gaming in general. You can be a totally super badass, awesome robot tank and still express maternal protective impulses. In the world of Titanfall 2, you might be enhanced by it.